Coming right up, tunneling under a castle, when liberty isn't quite liberty, having a good soak on the shores of the Danube, a chain bridge and a sissy bridge, and pastries of the undead. Will any of this make any sense at all? Stay tuned and find out. Hi, welcome to the latest companion video to the Bob and Nella's World website. Once again, I'm Bob, and Nella is my wife of 3 decades plus. Those of you who've seen the website or any of these videos know that we like to travel to different places, take pictures, add in background information, and throw the results up on the internet for the entertainment and edification of the interested, which probably includes you if you've gotten this far. The subject of this video, like the 5 preceding it, is Budapest, Hungary. In particular, we'll be cruising up and down the Danube with a lot of other tourists on a boat designed for this purpose. This isn't one of those cruises you may have seen in your junk mail, which takes you from one city to another. This cruise lasted about an hour and started and ended in the same place, but it did give us a quick look at the main Budapest landmarks, which are situated along the river, as you'll see shortly. When we left off in the last video, we were up at Buda Castle, gazing down longingly at the tour boats that were floating up and down the Danube and wondering how we could secure ourselves passage on one of these glorious vessels. Step 1 appeared to be getting out of the castle and off the castle's hill down to where the river was. And step 2 seemed to be getting to the other side of the river, as it looked like this is where the boats were tied up between voyages. Returning to the bus stop where we'd been dropped off and coming up the hill, we found a bus that would accomplish both of these steps for us. This bus would wind down the backside of the hill, pass through the hill to its front by way of a tunnel, and cross the river using the chain bridge. We took this trip and we got off at the stop at the far end of the bridge. At this point we ran into step 3, which was finding a boat. This involved more of a walk than we expected. We walked downstream and had almost reached the next bridge, called the Elizabeth Bridge, before we found a tour boat landing. The posted route for the tour consisted of first going south a couple of bridges and then turning around and going north past Buda Castle and the Parliament building, and then around Margaret Island and finally back south to our starting point. This looked like exactly what we wanted to do, so we bought tickets and waited until boarding was announced. When the announcement came, we didn't waste any time finding seats, which were unreserved. We wanted to sit in the front if possible so we could see in all directions. Nella is adept at threading her way through crowds, and this time she surpassed herself. We were able to get exactly the seats we wanted in the very front of the boat. For commentary, there were multilingual headsets waiting for us on the seats. From our starting point, the boat's first move was to make a big U-turn to head downstream. The route included 3 180-degree turns, 4 if you include the final approach back to the dock. I'll talk about the things we saw in order from south to north rather than the order in which we first saw them, so you don't get too disoriented. The southernmost point of our tour was just past the Liberty Bridge, which looks like this. The Liberty Bridge was first completed in 1896. At the time it was called the Franz Joseph Bridge, after the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, who drove in the bridge's last rivet himself as part of festivities celebrating the 1000th anniversary of Hungary. Like all the other bridges in Budapest, it was blown up by retreating Germans in 1945. But this was the first bridge across the Danube that was rebuilt, reopening in August of 1946. This was possible partly because this was the shortest such bridge in Budapest at 1,094 feet, and partly because the damage was restricted to the bridge's central span. At the time of its reopening, it was renamed the Liberty Bridge to celebrate the city's liberation from the Nazis by the Soviets, who unfortunately turned out not to be too interested in liberty either. Just south of the bridge, on the Buda side of the river, is this hotel, the Hotel Gellért. The hotel was completed in 1918 as the Hotel St. Gellért, named after Hungary's first bishop from back in the 11th century. Unfortunately, this opening happened shortly before the end of World War I, just as the Austro-Hungarian Empire was dissolving into a smoking pile of chaos. The hotel was taken over for military use in 1919, but factional conflicts died down in the following year, and it was able to finally start functioning as a hotel. And it functioned very successfully, as it turned out, as it was constructed on the site of one of Budapest's many thermal springs, which were and are thought to confer an assortment of health benefits on their visitors. Luxurious decorations and extensive services added to the appeal of the Gellért Spa. But World War II brought severe damage to the hotel and spa, and much of the luxury was lost in the facility's more Spartan post-war renovation. In another change, the new communist government was uncomfortable with anything religious and ordered the saint removed from the hotel's name. But a more recent renovation has restored much of the original splendor, if not the original name, and the hotel and spa are again popular destinations. At this point we started the big turnaround that would point us northward. This first gave us a nice look at the Budapest University of Technology and Economics. This institution was founded in 1782 and is considered to be the world's oldest institute of technology. It now has about 21,000 students and is responsible for about 70% of the engineering degrees issued in Hungary. Famous alumni you may or may not be familiar with include Theodor von Karman, considered by many to be the father of supersonic flight, and Erno Rubik of Rubik's Cube fame.
Sì, sì, quello che abbiamo fatto ieri, mattina.
Across the river is the main building of another university, the Corvinus University of Budapest. This university was founded in 1920 and now has about 14,500 students. It offers educational programs in business administration, economics, and social sciences. During the communist years, the school's name was changed to honor Karl Marx, but this name was dropped after communism was dropped in 1990. On a hill above the Liberty Bridge, there's a statue called the Liberty Statue, originally put up in 1947. Like the renaming of the bridge, the original intent of the statue was to honor the liberating forces of the Soviet Red Army. However, it soon became clear that Hungary had just traded one foreign master for another, and when the communists were tossed out in 1989, an inscription on the statue that memorialized the Soviets was altered to instead remember all of those who sacrificed their lives for the independence, freedom, and prosperity of Hungary. After passing under the bridge, we had a better look at the hill, which is called the Gellért Hill. This hill is just north of the Gellért Hotel and Spa I talked about earlier, and the 11th century bishop after whom all these things were named is said to have been thrown to his death from this hill in 1046. Near the base of the hill, there was an interesting looking turreted structure which turned out to be the entrance to a chapel and monastery built into caves within the hill. The facility was consecrated in 1926 and functioned throughout the war, briefly serving as a German field hospital. But it was closed by the Soviets in 1951 as part of a crackdown on Catholics. It reopened in 1989 and is now operated by the Pauline Order of Monks. Tourists are welcome. The boat continued northward toward the Elizabeth Bridge. Looking back toward the east end of the Liberty Bridge, we could see the great market hall we'd visited earlier in the day. For more on the hall, see our Buda Castle video. After passing by a number of picturesque Art Nouveau buildings, we eventually reached the Elizabeth Bridge, just south of our starting point. The Elizabeth Bridge, named for the 19th century Empress Elizabeth, known as Sissi, was first opened in 1903 when it strongly resembled the Liberty Bridge, which was then called the Franz Joseph Bridge. But the bridge, like the others, was blown up by the Nazis in 1945 and was eventually replaced by this more utilitarian bridge, which opened in 1964. This brought us back to our starting point with this lovely view of Buda Castle. We continued upstream toward the chain bridge. Beyond the chain bridge, we could see the recently renovated Matthias Church and the Fisherman's Bastion, also on top of Castle Hill. We'll have more to say about this church and bastion in a future video. After passing under the chain bridge, we could see more churches along the west bank of the river. This one is a Calvinist church, just downhill from the Matthias Church and first built in 1889. Just past the Calvinist church is this Catholic church devoted to St. Anne. It was completed in 1762. Across the river from the churches is the massive Hungarian Parliament building. This is the largest building in Hungary and was completed in 1904. You may have seen pictures of it in ads for river cruises. We'll examine it in more detail in another future video. North of the Parliament building, there is a 1.6-mile-long island in the middle of the Danube called Margaret Island, named for St. Margaret, who lived in a convent on the island in the 13th century. The island was created in its present form by a joining of 3 naturally occurring islands in the 19th century and is now a large recreational park. At its south end, the island is connected to both banks of the Danube by the Margaret Bridge. This bridge was first completed in 1876 and is the second oldest bridge in the city after the Chain Bridge. Our boat circled around the entire island, first following the river's east bank. At first the river bank was lined with buildings, but by the north end of the island there weren't any more structures. As we returned southward along the west bank, we had another nice look at the Parliament building and at the west bank itself, before eventually returning to the dock from which we'd started. By this time we pretty much had it for the day, so we headed back toward our hotel. On the way we came across a street vendor who was selling these tubular pastries, which were billed as being Transylvanian. We took one back to the hotel and found it to be tasty, though not as good as the aroma exuded as it was being cooked. To this day I haven't had any urges to drink anybody's blood, which is probably a good thing, but maybe a little disappointing. I hope you weren't disappointed by this video, which is now about over. If you were, feel free to say so if you must in the comments below, but I'll be happier if you actually enjoyed it. If you did, please add your reactions and subscribe if you're feeling adventurous. There's more Budapest to come, to be followed by other worldly destinations. To miss out would leave you incomplete, and your friends and family will probably think less of you. All you have to do to prevent this is watch the next video. See you then.
Sono parte, ci sono. Dai.